Some things on the internet are not meant to be found. They lurk in the shadows, waiting.
The gods didn't fear many things, but this they buried. Not defeated, not destroyed, not banished, buried. 4,000 years ago, every god, every ancient civilization, every priest, every king, dropped everything and came together for one single purpose: to put something in the ground and make sure. Nobody ever asked why. But here's the question that kept me up for 3 straight weeks. If the gods were all powerful, why didn't they just kill it? Why go through all of that? The rituals, the seals, the sacrifices. Why burn your own libraries? Why make your own priests forget? Unless killing it wasn't an option? Unless whatever this titan was. The gods were afraid of the answer. This is the story they buried with it. Stay with me. It started, as these things almost always do, with a completely unremarkable Tuesday. I was at my desk, bad coffee going cold in a mug I've owned for 6 years and never once intentionally washed. The kind of afternoon light that isn't quite bright enough to work by, but isn't dark enough to justify turning on a lamp, so you just sit in the gray and pretend it's fine. I had 3 browser tabs open: a digitized Sumerian lexicon, a Wikipedia article I kept fact-checking out of spite, and a takeout menu I'd been staring at for 40 minutes without making a decision. I was, in other words, thriving. I've debunked 3 ancient evil stories this year alone. I was good at this. Someone finds a weird tablet, mistranslates 2 words, and suddenly they've discovered proof of interdimensional warfare in the Bronze Age. My job, the part one actually enjoyed, was finding the thread that unraveled the whole thing. The mistranslation, the motivated reasoning, the dramatic leap from unusual archaeological feature to portal to the underworld. It was satisfying in the specific way that puncturing pretension is always satisfying. Clean, uncomplicated. The message came in at 4:47 p.m. A researcher I knew, loosely, the way you know people from comment sections and academic forums. Someone I'll call Mara, because she asked me not to use her name, and I'm choosing to respect that, for now. The message said, "Found something weird. Not your usual weird. Different weird. Sending you a file." I said, "How weird are we talking?" She said, "Remember that story you covered about the Anatolian dig? Scale of 1 to that." I said, "That story turned out to be a mistranslated drainage system." She said, "Yeah, this is not a drainage system." The file was a partial translation of a recently unearthed clay tablet, found not at a news site, but beneath one we already knew, deeper than the known structure, older, based on preliminary dating by nearly 800 years. The translation was incomplete, flagged with a dozen academic hedges and uncertainty markers. Normal, expected, the kind of document I read for fun on slow weekends. Except for one word. One word in the 3rd column, which the translator had left in the original script with a bracketed note beside it. No equivalent found. Closest approximation. The one that should not be continued. Note: this construction does not exist elsewhere in known proto-cuneiform. Origin of term: unclear. One word. No equivalent. No origin. I closed the file. Made a fresh coffee. Opened the file again. Of course I kept reading. Wouldn't you? The site is called Gersa Cable in the internal documentation. You won't find that name in any published paper. Officially, it's a surveying annex to a well-documented Sumerian settlement in the Zagros mountain foothills, the kind of administrative footnote that exists specifically to discourage further inquiry. Unofficially, it's where a joint Turkish-German excavation team spent 14 months between 2019 and 2021 trying to explain something that existing archaeological frameworks have no category for. Here's what they found. Beneath the known settlement, beneath 3 established occupation layers, beneath bedrock that geologists initially assessed as undisturbed, there is a structure, roughly 340 meters in diameter, circular, constructed from a basalt compound that doesn't match any quarry source within 600 kilometers. Carbon dating of organic material found in the mortar places initial construction at approximately 2100 BCE, which would already be strange given the depth. Thermoluminescence dating of the stone itself places it closer to 3,800 BCE. The team's lead geologist submitted her findings, then requested a transfer. She hasn't published since. Request from an international body I'm choosing not to name directly, though I'll say it is not primarily a cultural institution, and its headquarters are in Geneva. The second report was reclassified within 6 weeks. If you know which treaty framework governs that classification, you'll know where to look. Here's what they found in Chamber 3, which they did open. Every inscription across every wall surface, hundreds of them, floor to ceiling, had been deliberately defaced in one specific way. Not damaged, not eroded, methodically, surgically excised. A single word, recurring across every text, chiseled out of the stone with extraordinary care. Whatever it said, someone decided, thousands of years ago, that it should not be readable. Not forgotten. Unreadable. There's a difference. Here's where it stops being archaeology. Here's where it starts being a warning. Here is the part where a lesser researcher says, coincidence. I am not a lesser researcher. When the Gersa cable findings crossed my desk, I did what I always do. I went looking for the thing that would make it make sense. I pulled comparative mythology, cross-cultural cosmological texts, archaeological linguistics going back to the earliest written records we have. I was looking for the rational thread, the one that, once pulled, causes the whole alarming sweater to unravel into something boring and explainable. I found the opposite. Let me be precise about what I mean when I say these cultures never interacted. I don't mean they were geographically distant, though some were. I mean they were separated by centuries, by ocean, by the complete absence of any documented trade route, diplomatic contact, or shared linguistic ancestor. I mean that historians have spent careers confirming they developed independently. And yet, the oldest reference I found was a Sumerian lament tablet dated approximately 2100 BCE, cataloged, translated, filed, and almost entirely ignored because its content doesn't fit comfortably into any existing religious framework. The relevant passage, translated as conservatively as possible, describes an entity as the one that dreamed before dreaming was possible, whose sleep is the condition of our waking, whose name is the door we agree not to open. The tablet is not dramatic about this. It lists this entity the same way it lists grain allocations and cattle counts. The scribe who wrote it was not afraid. That's what makes it worse. They had simply accepted it, the way you accept weather, a fact of existence, neither good nor bad, just true and large and entirely beyond your management. The Hittite material is more procedural. A ritual text recovered from the royal archive at Hattusa specifies a 40-day purification rite, fasting, isolation, sensory restriction, required for any priest who spoke aloud a description of what the text calls the inheritor of the first silence. Not its name, its description. The rite wasn't punitive. It was medical, protective, as if the act of describing this thing accurately was itself a kind of exposure to something you'd then need to recover from. A fragment excluded from the published Dead Sea Scrolls collection, excluded quietly, without explanation, its catalog number simply absent from the released index, contains a single relevant line in a Proto-Semitic dialect. It was here before the word for before. We tended in our sleep, and do not remember. Multiple historians have noted these parallels independently. None of them have noted them in the same paper. Draw your own conclusions. There is a cuneiform phrase recovered from Chamber 5 at Gersa Cable that I haven't been able to get translated. Not for lack of trying. 3 separate translators, credentialed, experienced, none of them prone to theatrics. Each agreed to attempt it, and then, without any apparent communication between them, each submitted the same request, to be removed from the project. None gave a specific reason. One said, simply, that the phrase wasn't in a language she recognized. The other 2 said nothing at all. I don't know what it says. I've decided to leave it that way. Now that you understand what they found and what the ancients said about it, let me tell you what it actually was. I want to be careful here. Not cautious in the way I'm usually cautious, checking sources, hedging claims, leaving room for the rational explanation. Careful in the way you're careful when you're carrying something that could break in a way that hurts you. Because describing this thing is not a neutral act. The Hittites knew that. I know it now. So I'll tell you what I can, in the order I can stand to tell it. The physical descriptions, and there are dozens of them, scattered across the textual record in fragments, in marginalia, in images that ancient artists clearly did not want to finish, are all incomplete. Every one of them. And not incomplete in the way that time and decay make things incomplete. Incomplete in the way that suggests the people making them chose to stop, put down the stylus or the chisel or the brush and decided, consciously, that what they had recorded so far was already too much. The artistic depictions are the strangest part. You can find them if you know what you're looking for, certain seals, certain relief carvings, certain painted fragments in collections that don't publicize their full inventory. What they share is a quality I can only describe as visual resistance. The proportions are wrong in a way that is an error. Limbs that occupy too much of the frame, or too little, as if the artist understood intellectually that the thing had a shape but couldn't convince their own hand to. Translated, I was here before patience. I will be here after memory. Tell them I am not angry. Tell them I am waiting. I want to point out that not angry from a being that predates the concept of anger is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting in that sentence. I want to point that out, and I want it to be funny, and it almost is. Almost. The documented effect of proximity to the burial site, across every account, ancient and modern, is not madness. Not visions, not violence. It's clarity, a sudden, total, nauseating lucidity. The overwhelming sense that everything you have ever believed is precisely correct and completely, cosmically beside the point. If you were here for the Valdez case, the one I covered 8 months ago, you already know what that kind of clarity costs. So that's what they were dealing with. Now, how do you bury a god? The first question, the one I couldn't move past for almost 2 weeks, was coordination. 7 civilizations, separated by thousands of miles, by mountain ranges and oceans and centuries of complete mutual ignorance. No shared language, no documented diplomatic contact, no common calendar, no common cosmology, no common anything. And yet the ritual record, fragmentary, scattered across 4 continents, pieced together from sources that have never been cited in the same room, describes the same ceremony, the same sequence, the same lunar window, performed simultaneously across the ancient world approximately 4,000 years ago. How not have 3 explanations? I'll give them to you in ascending order of how much I wish I hadn't thought of them. The first, they were all responding independently to the same observable phenomenon. Something changed in the world. Something felt, something dreamed, something written in the behavior of animals or the pattern of storms, and separately, without coordination, every major civilization on Earth arrived at the same solution. This explanation is almost comforting. It implies the burial was intuitive, natural, the obvious response. The second, there was contact we haven't found evidence of. A network of intermediaries, a proto-diplomatic structure so old and so deliberately obscured that 4,000 years of archaeology has turned up nothing. Someone coordinated this. Someone knew everyone. This explanation is less comforting because it implies an infrastructure of knowledge that was subsequently erased with extraordinary thoroughness. The third, they were told, not by each other, by something that needed the burial to happen and had the means to ensure that it did. I'm not endorsing this explanation. I'm telling you it exists. There is a reason I haven't named the 7 civilizations involved. If you research the intersection of those cultures in that precise time period, the pattern becomes visible on its own. I'll let you find it. The architecture of the burial operated on 7 nested seals, each constructed from a different material, each requiring a specific and distinct form of ongoing maintenance. Cedar oil applied to the outermost ring at each new moon. A particular frequency of sound, sustained for 7 days annually, directed at the second. The details of seals 3 through 6 are either lost or classified, depending on which part of the documentary record you're working from. The innermost seal, the the one directly containing the chamber, is described inconsistently across sources. Two texts say bone. One text, the one I find most difficult to sit with, says agreement. Not a physical substance. An agreement. A sustained collective act of will, maintained across generations, holding something in place through the sheer accumulated weight of everyone deciding, together, not to look. The structure wasn't built to hold the Titan in place. It was built to hold it asleep. That distinction between imprisonment and sedation is the most important thing I can tell you, and I need you to hold on to it. What they sacrificed to accomplish this wasn't blood. It was knowledge. Entire priestly lineages took formal vows, binding, hereditary, absolute, to forget specific things. Not to keep them secret. To genuinely, structurally forget. Libraries were burned across the ancient world in a period historians have always attributed to conquest or accident. Some of it was. Not all of it. The burning was, in specific documented cases, ritual, deliberate, a sacrifice of understanding at civilizational scale. They didn't lock it away. They made themselves forget the key, and then they forgot they'd forgotten. There is a text I believe to be a reconstruction of the final sealing, written down later from oral tradition, but carrying the specific weight of something that was witnessed. I've translated it as faithfully as I can. We are doing this for the ones who come after. We are doing this knowing they will not understand why. We are doing this knowing they will call us superstitious, primitive, afraid of what we didn't understand. We are doing this knowing they will try to undo it. We are doing this anyway. Remember nothing. Remember only this. Do not finish what we are stopping. Modern governments have known about Gersa cable since at least 1953. A classified assessment program. Designation Ural Stillwater, if you want something to search for and not find, has been active in various forms since the early Cold War, embedded within a geological survey initiative that exists on paper and does nothing described on that paper. The burial held. For 4,000 years, it held. Here's the part where I tell you about the cracks that I want to pause here and ask. How many of you are listening to this at night? Okay, good. Keep going. I need you to understand something about what I'm about to show you. Each of these data points, taken individually, is explainable, dismissible, the kind of thing a skeptic, and I am, professionally, a skeptic, files under anomalous but unremarkable and moves on from. I was a very good skeptic for a very long time. What broke that wasn't any single piece of evidence. It was the shape they made when you put them together. Patterns don't lie. They don't have the imagination for it. Here's the first crack. Microseismic monitoring in the Zagros region. Standard geological telemetry, the kind that runs continuously and gets reviewed by graduate students looking for tectonic data, began flagging anomalous readings at and around the Gersa cable coordinates in 2018. Normal microseismic activity is random, stochastic. It clusters and disperses according to subsurface pressure dynamics that are well understood and deeply uninteresting. This wasn't random. The readings were rhythmic, regular, occurring at an interval that a graduate student named in an internal memo as disturbingly consistent before her supervisors reassigned her to a different monitoring region and the memo was quietly removed from the shared server. That interval, the gap between each rhythmic pulse, matches, to within a 4% margin, a description in a Sumerian administrative text of the Titan's breathing rate during dormancy. That text was written 4,000 years ago. I don't know what to do with a 4% margin of error across 4 millennia. I've decided it's close enough. Here's the second crack. 3 excavation teams, unrelated projects, different institutions, different countries, different funding sources, have independently unearthed new inscriptions over the last decade. New, meaning freshly carved, not newly discovered, not previously overlooked. New, as confirmed by material analysis that everyone involved has been extremely reluctant to publish. The stone tests as ancient. The carving does not. Someone, or something, has been adding to the record. What the inscriptions say has not been released. One team lead described them in a private communication that was forwarded to me through 2 intermediaries as directional. She didn't elaborate. I've been thinking about that word ever since. Here's the third crack. There is an online forum. I'm not going to name it, and I'd ask you not to go looking genuinely. I mean that. Where, over the past 3 years, a thread has accumulated contributions from individuals across 6 continents describing the same recurring dream element. A language. Not images, not feelings. Not the usual dream architecture, a specific, consistent, structured language appearing in the dreams of people who have never met, share no cultural background, and have no documented connection to each other or to the burial site. Linguists who have reviewed the documented fragments, and there are linguists who have reviewed them, working quietly, without institutional affiliation, have identified it as related to, but predating, the oldest proto-language families currently known. It's not something we lost. It's something we were made to stop speaking. If you know the forum, you've probably already seen the thread. If you haven't, maybe don't look. Here's the fourth crack, and I'll be brief because the facts are simple and the implications are not. In 1987, the Journal of Near Eastern Archaeological Studies published a paper analyzing anomalous structural features at a Zagros mountain excavation site. It was thorough, carefully sourced, and cited 43 times in the following decade. In 2019, it was retracted. No reason was given. No erratum was published. The paper was simply removed, the way you remove something that should not have been visible in the first place. The lead author, Dr. Henning Voss, died in March 2021. Natural causes, officially. He was 58. I'm not saying someone died because of what they knew. I'm saying the timing is rude. Here's what the official record says. And here's what the record they didn't mean to leave behind says. Pay attention to the difference. I have a document. I want to be precise about what I mean by that, because precision matters here, and I've already said more than I'm comfortable with. I have a partial document, 41 pages of what was originally a longer internal assessment. The page numbering skips from 23 to 31 and again from 38 to 45. So draw your own conclusions about what's missing. Produced under the Ural-Stillwater designation I mentioned earlier. It is dated 2017. It was not meant to exist outside of a very specific distribution list. It exists outside of that list because someone on that list decided, at some personal cost I don't want to think too hard about, that it should. The first 20 pages read the way classified documents always read. Dense, procedural, terminally committed to language that communicates nothing while technically saying everything. Assessment of structural integrity parameters. Review of containment viability metrics. Evaluation of ongoing monitoring protocols. The writing is airless and deliberate and tells you almost nothing except that the people writing it were very carefully choosing not to say what they meant. Then, around page 21, the language starts to slip. Not dramatically. These are still bureaucrats, still professionals, still people trained to keep their register flat and their conclusions hedged. But the hedges get softer. The passive constructions start appearing in places where active voice was doing fine before. By page 23, the last page before the gap, someone has written, in what is clearly a first draft that should have been revised before circulation. Standard containment frameworks are not applicable to this situation, and continued application of same represents a category error that this office is not equipped to address. Category error. I've used those words in this video already. I didn't take them from this document. I took them from the ancient texts. The fact that a classified 2017 government assessment used the same phrase, independently, tells you something about what pattern emerges when honest people look at this long enough. The redactions are instructive. There's a full paragraph on page 31 where every line is blacked out except the prepositions and conjunctions of, and, with, toward, which tells you the sentences were long and the nouns were dangerous, and whatever was moving toward whatever else was moving toward it was considered too specific to leave readable. The shape of what's missing is a timeline. Something is being tracked. Something is changing at a rate specific enough to document. I spoke to someone who was present at a Ural-Stillwater briefing in 2014. I'm not going to describe them beyond saying they are no longer professionally affiliated with any institution that would require them to deny this conversation. They said, "The terminology kept frustrating me. Everyone in that room kept calling it a containment issue, a structural degradation problem, like it was a dam, like it was engineering, and the engineers had just made some mistakes, and we needed better engineers." I kept trying to explain, and no one wanted to hear this, that the structure wasn't failing. The structure was being refused. Refused. Not breached. Not eroded. Refused. The containment was never a cage. It was a negotiated silence, a mutual agreement sustained across 4,000 years by the accumulated weight of civilizations choosing, generation by generation, not to remember. And something, now, is renegotiating that I've found references fragmentary, oblique, but consistent to other entities in the cosmological record that are aware of this. Some of them appear, based on the texts, to be concerned. There are specific ritual traditions across 3 unconnected cultures that appear to be oriented not toward their own gods, but toward placating something else, something adjacent to the burial, something that has been watching the seals the way you watch a structural wall in a building you're not sure you should still be inside. Those entities being worried, I find alarming. What I find more alarming is the textual evidence that some of them are not worried at all. Make of that what you will. If you were here for my coverage of the Kessler Archive, the series I ran 18 months ago, the one that got 3 episodes pulled from the platform before I mirrored them, you'll recognize the shape of this. The institutional fingerprints, the retraction pattern, the way the official record develops convenient gaps right where the important things should be. I have more of this document. I'm not posting all of it. Not here, not now. If enough of you are paying attention, and you'll know what paying attention means in this context, I'll continue this in a follow-up. So, what happens if it wakes up? I researched that too. I almost wish I hadn't point 3 ancient traditions, none of them in dialogue with each other, none of them sharing a cosmological framework, none of them even agreeing on what the Titan is, describe the same sequence of events following what they uniformly call the resumption. Not the awakening, not the escape, the resumption, as if what's coming isn't something new, as if it's the continuation of something that was always, only, paused. Here is what they agree on. First, dreams become accurate. Not symbolic, not interpretive, accurate. Worldwide, simultaneously, people begin dreaming events before they occur, conversations before they happen, truths about themselves and others that they had no conscious access to. The ancient texts don't frame this as a gift. They frame it as a symptom. The membrane between the sleeping mind and the actual structure of reality begins to thin, because something on the other side of it. Second, language begins to fail. Not communication. People can still speak, still write, still be understood. What fails is the distance between word and meaning. The comfortable gap that lets you say, "I'm fine," when you aren't, that lets metaphor exist, that lets you approximate and hedge and perform and protect yourself with the soft imprecision of speech. That gap closes. Words begin meaning exactly what they mean. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing navigable. The texts describe this stage with what reads, in translation, as genuine grief. As if losing the gap between word and truth is a bereavement. Third, the thing the gods needed everyone to forget becomes rememberable, not revealed, not transmitted, simply available, like a door that was always in the wall of every room you've ever been in, that you somehow consistently failed to notice. And one morning you notice it, and it's been there your whole life. I know it sounds almost good, like an improvement, even. More accurate dreams, more honest language, access to something true that was previously hidden. I hear it. I sat with it for a long time. That's the part that kept me up at 3 in the morning for a week straight. Not the scale of the thing, not the seals, not the coordinated burial. This, because the ancient priests, the ones who built the containment, who sacrificed knowledge, who burned their own libraries to make the silence hold, they weren't afraid of what the Titan would destroy. They were afraid of what it would explain. The secret the gods needed forgotten wasn't a secret about the Titan. It was a secret about us, about what humans are, about why we are the way we are, built the way we are, limited in the specific and precise ways we are limited, about what we were made to not know, and who made that decision, and why, and what it means that the decision was made at all. The Titan's waking doesn't end the world. It ends the story the world has been telling itself about what it is. All right, let me do what I'm supposed to do. We covered the site, the structure beneath the structure, the doors that lock from the outside, the word chiseled out of every surface it appeared on. We covered the texts, the Sumerian lament, the Hittite purification rites, the fragment that should have been published and wasn't. We covered the Titan itself, in the pieces I was willing to describe. The burial, what it cost, what it required civilizations to sacrifice just to make the silence hold. The cracks in that silence, geological, archaeological, linguistic, institutional. The document that shouldn't exist, and the person who told me the structure wasn't failing, it was being refused. And we covered what comes after, if the resumption happens, the dreams, the language, the door in the wall of every room. That's the case. That's what I can say out loud. Here's what I've been avoiding saying. The coordinates embedded in the Gersa cable documentation, the ones I told you at the start I wasn't going to read aloud. I spent 3 months assuming they were geographic. A location, the burial site itself, or something related to it. That was the obvious interpretation, and I am, professionally, someone who trusts obvious interpretations until they fail. They failed. The coordinates are not a location. The numeric system they're encoded in, which took me an embarrassingly long time to identify because it predates every positional notation system I'd previously encountered, isn't mapping space. It's mapping time. What looks like a set of geographic coordinates is a date, a specific, calculable date, derived from a calendrical system that the burial's architects used across multiple sites and texts. I've had the calculation checked by 2 people whose mathematical judgment I trust absolutely and whose names I will not share here. The date is not 4,000 years ago. The date is not historical at all. I'm going to leave it there. You'll understand why. Told you at the very beginning of this that this one scared me. I want to be specific about why, now that you have the full picture. It's not the Titan. It's not the scale of it, or the burial, or the cracks, or any individual piece of what I've put in front of you tonight. It's this: the gods were scared first. These were not primitive people projecting fear onto the unknown. These were the architects of the ancient world, the entities that every major human civilization appealed to for protection, for meaning, for the assurance that something powerful was paying attention and was, broadly, on our side. And they were scared. Scared enough to coordinate the impossible. Scared enough to burn their own knowledge. Scared enough to build 7 seals and make the innermost one out of something the texts can't agree was even a physical material. Whatever they were scared of is still there. And something in the mathematics of this says the agreed-upon silence has almost run its term. I found this story because someone sent it to me. I don't know who. The account that messaged me was created the day they made contact and deleted the day after. I checked both times because I had the instinct to. The message was 4 sentences. It said, "You cover things people don't want covered. This one matters more than the others. You should know about this before it matters. Start with the Gersa Cable survey notes." That was 7 months ago. I've been sitting on this for 7 months, building the case, checking the sources, following the threads, trying to find the one that unravels it. I haven't found it. I'm doing the only thing left to do, which is putting it in front of the people who watch this channel, because collectively, in my experience, you know things I don't. You've proven that more than once. If you have encountered something that fits this pattern, a symbol, a dream, a linguistic fragment, a text that didn't stay published long, an experience near any site in the Zagros region that you've never been able to explain adequately, I'm asking you to leave it below. I read every comment on these videos, especially the ones that disappear. There's a part 2 to this. I haven't decided if I'm making it. One of my sources went quiet 3 weeks ago. They'd been responsive for months. Not forthcoming, but responsive, which in this context is as good as it gets. 3 weeks ago, nothing. I'm choosing to believe that's a coincidence, because the alternative requires me to make decisions I'm not ready to make about how far I'm willing to take this. There's a phrase in the burial text I didn't translate for you tonight. One specific construction appearing 3 times across 3 separate source documents that I removed from my notes before recording. I'm leaving it out on purpose. You'll understand why if you find it. And some of you will find it. You always do. The archaeologists found one thing they didn't include in any report. Written on the floor of the innermost chamber, below the inscription about patience and memory and waiting. Not carved, written in something dark, applied by hand. Recently enough that it hadn't fully dried when the survey team photographed it. Not in any ancient language. Not in any language that required translation at all.